Okay. Hi, everyone. Is that okay?
Hi.
Okay, so
Yes.
we're going to start our second webinar of the spring season right now. So you're here today, and we're going to listen to Dr. Carlos Vega-Ortiz speak. His presentation is Petrophysics, Geochemistry, and Data Science, Enhancing Reservoir Characterization. There's another webinar coming up next month, so I can put in the chat later details about that. But please welcome Dr. Vega-Ortiz, and here he is.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending. Thanks, people here at EGI and also people online. The presentation I'm talking about is multidisciplinary approach for a reservoir characterization, including petrophysics, geochemistry, as in source rock analysis, and data science. So data science has been a very useful tool to provide more like statistical robust analysis, and we are incorporating all these in some of the reservoir that we are working at University of Utah. So so just a brief acknowledgement. This project is funded by Department of Energy, NETL, project number as on the screen, improving production energy in the emerging paradox oil play. So this is a complex oil reservoir, oil and gas reservoir in Utah. This is the agenda I'm going to be providing. So I'm going to first speak about the petrophysics description, then the source rock analysis of samples that we did from cuttings from the wells, and later I'm going to speak about the data science and machine learning incorporation, and then I'll close with a reservoir description. So to start with, the Paradox Basin is a basin in Utah, central Utah. You see the small mapping here. The primary objective of the project overall is to assess and evaluate the structurally complex emerging unconventional paradox oil play. So it's a bit redundant name, but that's how it is. I'll give you some of the details later as well. Particularly, we're going to focus on the Cane Creek Shale, which is a major play that has been historically producing in this area. So these are some of the features of the basin. So we have like a complex structural fault orientation. So we have like a not precisely orthogonal, but somehow connected fault system. And the play that we are going to be analyzing is the area that lies in between these fault reservoirs. So as you can see, historically, the markers, the black squares, are the historical wells or exploratory wells that have been drilled in the area, but somehow they have been unsuccessful. So this area has been explored since early 1960 and 1970. And we observe on the green squares, the areas that had achieved somehow commercial production. So we took on the challenge on trying to identify, or by using modern techniques, how could we approach this integration. So the area that we are studying is the green perimeter here. And the University of Utah, we in association with the DOE and the Zephyr Energy, the partners, we drilled one well, well, actually three wells located in the A marker right there. So in here we drill first a pilot well, which is like a vertical well, somehow vertical, and then a lateral well that extends into the northwest trajectory, parallel to the faulting system associated with this particular basin. And then there's another third well that is being drilled as there was one attempt, some complications. There is going to be a second attempt in the central part of this region. So hopefully we can update our results as we get information back from the data. Likewise, I'm going to take some of the legacy data in the red circles like this. Those are the wells that have proper like a triple combo information, sorry, quad combo information, gamma ray, density, resistivity, neutron porosity, and that penetrates the formation of the cane creek. So those are the wells, from all the different wells around the area. Those are the ones that we selected because they have the proper information for ability analysis. So this is the overall interpretation. So the stratigraphic sequencing area, it's quite complex, and I broke down why we need to have all this. So basically, the target is on the Carboniferous Pennsylvanian paradox formation, which is underlined by Permian, Triassic, Jurassic, and all the way to Cretaceous. So we have all these stratigraphic column, and within the paradox basin, there is up to 27 different clastic and salt sequences. That's because of the sedimentary analysis. Back in the day, the sea level was rising and lowering, so that led to all these different sequences. And the sequence of interest that we have is the clastic number 21, which is the Cane Creek. All above, we have some other common formations that some other producers in the area, mostly in the Four Corners area, or southern in the Utah, they produce, for instance, the Hovenweep, the Gothic, Chimney Rock, but the one that most of the target is this Cane Creek. Within the Cane Creek, we have another sub-classification of the different sub-phases, for which the Cane Creek B and Cane Creek C, those are the targets because they have the largest organic content. So those are the targets within the entire stratigraphic sequence. So regarding the wells, this is the architecture of the wells that were drilled in here. So the blue path in here is the first well, the State 16-2, that's the name of that. And it's not precisely vertical because of the plan of the well, but it's pilot well. So in this pilot well, these are the markers or the formation tops that we are going to be facing, starting from the top of the paradox. And then we start to see all the different clastic and salt sequences. I'm just highlighting the top of the clastics. And again, the clastic 21, that's the one of interest. So for the pilot well, there were some complications at the moment of taking the core, precisely the Cane Creek. So we were unable to to obtain petrophysical logs at the Cane Creek, so which is very bad, not an ideal situation, but we managed to retrieve cuttings, either cuttings or actual cores. So for the purposes of the source rock analysis, the green circles are the locations where we obtained samples to perform pyrolysis analysis. And then after once that pilot well was completed, the lateral well took this shape in order to drill through the different phases along the Cane Creek. And the well was completed with 13 different fracking stages, which are represented by these small squares down here. So up to 13 fracking stages were done. And I'm highlighting here the major faults that were interpreted as the well was analyzed from the petrophysical and the geology team. From the lateral well, we obtain samples of drilling cuttings, like every 30 feet. So we have entire set of data of samples for which we could complete the analysis. So that's overall the layout of the information of the wells that I'm going to be analyzing. So petrophysics overview, this is a very generic data set, and for which I'm presenting the gamma ray, resistivity, the shallow and deep, density, and neutron porosity. Neutron porosity in this case was used logged with the limestone matrix, although, as I'm going to explain later, not necessarily represent the entire totality of the lithology. Some of the lithology, particularly at the shallow formations, have more siliciclastic content. The ones in the middle has more like a limestone content, and the ones at the bottom have more dolomitic content. So it's quite complex data set for analysis. And on the left column, on the left side, this is just schematics on the multiple clastic sequences that we are going to be analyzing. So going a bit more a little in detail on the lithology identification. So this is a traditional cross plot, and I'm highlighting the area. The color code for each of the dots is correspond to the depth. So the light colors are shallower, the red colors are in the medium clastics, and the darker to black are the deeper ones. So as we can see, the cane creek, the concentration of the points that are located around the cane creek are within the line that correspond to dolomite interpretation. So that's how we can observe or predict or anticipate the different lithology that we are observing across the different clastic sequences. So this is just different perspective, no? All these points that we see mixing here, those are the points that are off scale because of the logging tools. They are designed to measure within a certain range. So most of the salts are either off range or highly contaminated by the plastics. So all these salt information we can just disregard. For that purpose, the blue bars or the blue lines that we see here are like a very, very fine-tuned formation tops because of the same reason. Why? Because of we need to include only the data that has useful lithological information. If we mismatch the formation top and include a little bit of the salt, that means we are going to include the noisy data that we don't need to use. So that's going to contaminate or disrupt the statistical analysis that we are going to make. So that's the petrophysical description. Then I'm going to talk about the source rock analysis. Source rock analysis was made in a pyrolysis, like an anhydrous pyrolysis instrument here at the University of Utah. It's called the Hawk system. It's very similar to the Rockeval 6. Some differences on how do the peak or estimations or the path of the temperature, for instance, or the temperature measurements are done. But overall, results are somehow comparable, as I'm going to explain later. So these are some of the samples that we've worked from the drilling cuttings. So the entire data set, that I explained earlier, was given in this way, like different formations. In here we can see like a clear content for the highly salt or clastic contamination, and the darker colors are coming from those areas that has the most organic content. So overall, this is the typical performance of the instrument. So the samples are crushed to a particular number of mesh system and then weighted. And then that small sample is placed in a crucible and placed inside the oven. So each of the samples that we analyze repeats this pattern. So the test starts by having like a pre-purge at the temperature of 130 degrees. And this is just to eliminate all the water, moisture, and the volatiles that are in the sample. And then the temperature is increased, and that is going to produce the first hydrocarbon reading. So this hydrocarbon reading is the free oil that is contained on the sample. That means this oil is either migrated or produced within the same rock. So the amplitude of this first peak is going to give us the indication of how much oil is present on the rock. The second peak, as we start increasing or ramping up the temperature, this is going to be called the S2. S2 peak is the hydrocarbons that are produced from the kerogen contained in the rock. So the larger the peak, the larger the organic material that we have on the sample. And that's an indication of the potential of a generation, hydrocarbon generation here. Again, the larger the peak, the larger the yield that is occurring from the kerogen. And the peak of this S2 is going to give us indication of what's going to be the Tmax. So the Tmax is the thermal maturity of the rock. Thermal maturity means that the rock or the kerogen has been either underexposed to the conditions of temperature and pressure, and they haven't been converted into oil, or they're going to tell us if they are within the right window of temperature for which the hydrocarbons have been produced and expelled from the rock. Overall, that's the entire repetition of the test. So the first one is made, the first set is made of in an inert using helium to avoid any oxidation. And the second part is made with air. So all the components are exposed to oxygen. So this is going to give us another set of information. This is going to give us the organic content, the non-organic content, the CO2, and the carbon monoxide that is produced from the sample. All this information is compiled in a different way. This is the standard. This is another. This is one set of shale that is used for the calibration. And this is the first set of data that we observe from the peak. So we see a small peak at the beginning that's related to either oil-based mud or contaminated material or residual hydrocarbons. And then we start to see the behavior of the peaks S1 and S2 is somehow different. So that's the whole purpose of this analysis. So each rock is going to have a particular signature that is going to give us an indication of the production of the hydrocarbons and their respective Tmax. So once we have all this information compiled and processed, we get into this type of charts, which is the typical Van-Kerevelen diagrams. So when we combine all the different information and calculate the oxygen index and hydrogen index, we can foresee or we can identify, first of all, the kerogen type. So kerogen type for all the samples that we are having is mostly either type 3 or in the limit to type 4. Type 4 means inert, so not good. But since they are somehow on the onset in between the type 2 and type 3, so they are still considered as a good gas-producing samples. As we can see, the blue diamonds are the ones corresponding to the clastic 21, which is the Cane Creek, although the samples from the clastics above, particularly the blues, the light blue circle or the inverted light blue, are the clastic 9 or clastic 19, that they also have potential or they have enough organic content to be considered or to be analyzed on a further analysis. The chart or the plot on the right-hand side is the indication for the thermal maturity. So as we notice, there is a window, optimal window, at which we can confirm that the hydrocarbon has been exposed to the right conditions of temperature for the hydrocarbons to be produced naturally. So some of them are below the threshold. So these samples could be like immature, and some of them are going to be post-mature. So that means they already have been totally converted, the kerogen has been converted into oil. So some of these samples will not produce. So good news, we have a bunch of those within the range. And the fact that they are on the area of the type 3, that means they are like a gas-prone or gas-producing samples. These are different types of charts. This is called the S2 versus stock. You remember the S2 peak was indicator of the hydrocarbons generated from the kerogen. And this is giving us that there is good potential for gas production of these samples in here. Again, this green square correspond to the clastic 8. And this other chart is hydrocarbon generation versus thermal maturity, at which we can identify that some of them are like inert, but some of them are still like in good potential. So The bottom line of all these charts is like we shouldn't consider only the TOC. The TOC is the kind of the indicator, but is not the solely indicator because we need to combine, or we need to provide other information such as these different charts. So that was for some of the samples. Some other samples that we analyzed. I mean, I must report this because not everything is ideal. We can see that the first peak that we measured in here was very, very high. That means those samples were contaminated by oil basement. So when we investigated a little bit, it turns out that the procedure, the wells advised to wash the samples with diesel. So we don't only have the oil-based mud, but somehow we impregnated the samples with even more hydrocarbons. And it's not good news because, I mean, that's disrupting the entire source of analysis, the source of analysis. So even though we still have somehow reliable S1 and S2, these samples are going to be offset by a certain amount that we intended. We perform a couple of experiments by removing the contamination from the diesel by using like a toluene or using like a methanol, and the results were even worse. So we just relied on having this with the asterisk in there that we have contamination from oil basement. These are the results from some of the samples in the lateral well. This is the LNCC. As we can see, all these samples are somehow with a higher hydrogen index. What that means, there is an implicit offset caused by the oil-based mud. So that's something we need to consider. So all these samples has to be actually lowered, but that's some of the questions we need to answer. Although for the maturity, all the samples are within good range of producibility. So now, how do we incorporate the machine learning prediction with the pyrolysis? I mean, how do we start incorporating all these different multidisciplinary data sets? And again, I'm highlighting the area of interest, and I'm highlighting the location of the wells for which we have petrophysical information. The data set or the entire exercise consists of the following. So we have a data set of basic logs, which is the gamma ray, resistivity, density, and porosity, in one hand, which are continuous curves or continuous data sets. And every of the variations that we observe, for instance, on the gamma ray, the fact that the gamma ray is oscillating back and forth, that means there is some like a geological information or mineralogical composition inherent to each of these points. And that goes along with the rest of the logs, resistivity, density, porosity. Even though there's a trend, there's going to be lithological variations associated to the geology or to the sedimentary analysis or sedimentary conditions that the rock was formed. In the other hand, we have the lab measurements, which are discrete points for the samples associated to each of these depths. So one of the big question is, how can we incorporate these small data sets from the lab measurements, because we cannot have a measurement for every single meter of every single feet of the formation, but we need to create some alternative to create these continuous TOC curves. There are some conventional methods. The typical used in the industry are the PASI method or the delta log R, for which they use the density of the formation and the density log. This ROV and the ROV baseline. And there are some other constants like this. They use the vitrinate reflectance again for everything for samples taken from the well, and they use this polynomial approximation for the coefficients L1, L2, all the way to L6 are tested on a particular set of formations somewhere in the world, which means that not necessarily represents the conditions that we have in the well that we are analyzing. And this is the type of curve that they produce. So they produce this the blue curve. So as we can see, it's when we compare to the actual TOC values, some of the data are either overestimated or underestimated. So there's a bit of discrepancy between the data that we have from the conventional models to the real TOC values. Other methodology is the Schmoker. This one is a bit more extreme because they use these values, constants, Ka, Kb. Again, these are obtained for a particular set of formation somewhere in the, I don't know, which region or basin. So even though we can use that particular constant, it will not reflect the actual petrophysical properties of the rocks that we have in Utah. So in order to overcome this data, we started to have like an approach by using machine learning models. These machine learning models provide like a statistically robust lithology controlled correlations for prediction of continuous data. So in one hand, we will have the information of the petrophysical logs, and in the other hand, we have the reference data. So we will provide a training data set for which we're going to evaluate different machine learning models, perform some iterations to select which one is the best model, and to finally apply the continuous data and produce continuous data sets. This should be TOC. I put DTC and DTS because that's another application, but that's also outside the scope of this research, but it's integrated as well. So the whole purpose of this is, again, in each of the depths that we have lab measurement, we are going to have what is going to be the value or each of the individual logs. So we are going to have a full data set that we can use as a training model. Why? Because we know the values of the formation of the petrophysical data to the corresponding lab measurement. So in a way, we are going to perform like a different correlation models, mathematically and statistically evaluated for the machine learning. So by using different analysis, like a root tree model, artificial neural network, Gaussian process regression, and using different parameters to each of these models, we obtained that the ones that have the best performance are the Gaussian progressive regression. Those are the ones in blue in here. Compared, for instance, the RMSE, we know that the lower the RMSE, the better the performance. And also for the R-square, the higher is going to be best. There was some concerns, like why we have a negative R-square, and that's because of the statistical variation that we have on the petrophysical logs. There is no clear correlation. Although the Gaussian process, the GPR, mathematically they are able to provide a consistent methodology to provide statistically sound data. This analysis is providing the performance of the data weighting, and that's another factor. If we incorporate the raw log data set, we see that the gamma ray has a higher weight compared to the density. And why is this happening? That's because of the scale or the magnitude of units of the gamma ray typically goes from 0 to 200, whereas the resistivity goes from 0.1 to 20,000, right? So the magnitude of the scale is going to be large. And if we compare only magnitudes, there is going to be disruption or discontinuity on the data in there. When we have a rescaling of the logs, that means we are aligning all the different logs on the wells within the same frame, and also a normalization. When we have that process, we observe that the density has the higher value, followed by the resistivity. And not surprisingly, those are the values that are used for PASI. You know, back in the 1990s, they already knew this, and we are confirming that they are providing at least from the geological point of view, density and resistivity has the highest correlation to TOC. So once we incorporate all the different models, we see that we can produce a machine learning predicted TOC by incorporating all this. And this curve has a better performance than the conventional methods, the PASI or delta log R or the Schmoker. So with this chart, we can confirm that we can utilize these machine learning tools that will provide a more accurate representation of the petrophysical properties of the well, because it incorporates the inherent lithological information that is implied on the logs. So this is when we expand this model into the different logs, we see that we can predict or we can associate what's going to be the TOC values across the different region, across the different wells. So that's another good input in here. Now, talking about the lateral well, the 16.2 LNCC. These are the data set that we utilize from the HOC, from the the measured TOC on the lab from the cuttings. But remember, these are the samples that were affected by oil-based mud. So there's a offset that we need to correct, or it has to be at least highlighted that it will be high. That data is going to be offset. And when we repeat the procedure by implementing that machine learning from the petrophysical logs into the TOC, we observe that we can produce a continuous curve on which is the black curve in this case, for the TOC, which is again the main indicator for the organic content. So in this chart, we are plotting along the hydrocarbon measurements from the mud logging. The red curve is the C1 content, methane. And we observe that there is some particular concentration of methane around certain areas, specific areas along the lateral well. And this pattern is also reflected by the C4, actually, sorry, this should be labeled C4. Then we started to investigate, like, what does that mean to have, like, not erratic TOC, because that corresponds to the information that we have from the well, as the well is going across the different layers. But how is this integrated with hydrocarbon content as we are drilling the well? This is another comparison of the conventional TOC curves, the delta log R, the Schmoker, and we observe that even though with the offset is not that accurate, we are still within the range of these values. So again, the delta log R underestimates, the Schmoker overestimates, and the curve that we obtain is somehow more representative. For this analysis, I'm going to incorporate this sonic scanner data. So sonic scanner data goes along with the borehole geometry. So the chart that we have at the top is just a 3D representation of the caliper measurements in 4 arms. So we observe that there are certain areas on the lateral well that the borehole expands a little bit. Certain areas that the hole has some sort of ovality. Why? How do we see the ovality? Because we see that there is some like a red shading on one axis compared to the other axis. So that means that in this particular section, the well has some ovalities, kind of a breakout. And that pattern repeats some over here. I'm plotting here 2 different mappings for the sonic data. One is the slowness time projection, which is basically the amplitude of the waveform as they are received across the different planes. So when we see strong correlation, that means that there is the signal of the sonic data is received properly. And when we see like a sections of blue, blue shading. That means that the wafer has been disrupted and there is attenuation on the signal, which means there is something that is causing that signal attenuation to be occurring. Likewise, for the slowness frequency analysis, SFA, we observe that there are some regions that are breaking the continuity on the otherwise continuous black curve. So these sections in here is telling us two things. One, either the tool is malfunctioning or there is something of the information that is causing these disruptions. And this is an indication of the faults, faults, open fractures, open faults that we can observe in here. And this is also correlatable with the gamma ray and the caliper. So when we start incorporating all this information, we notice that there are certain areas of interest that we should be paying attention to because of the high faulting concentration. When we analyze the sonic data or the dipolar sonic, we observe that the dipolar sonic tool works in this way. So there's a waveform that is traveling in one axis, and the other waveform is going to travel orthogonal to that particular axis. So this is going to give us an indication of how homogeneous or how heterogeneous the formation is. So when there is a homogeneous, the both signals are going to travel at the same time, and the delta T is going to be the same, like in this case. Like in this particular case, there is not so much difference in between the sonic signal that we are receiving from one axis compared to the other one. But there is going to be some certain areas that that discrepancy is going to be large. That means that there is a heterogeneity in there. So this heterogeneity is measured with anisotropy. That means the geomechanical properties on the formation are going to be different. And that's an indication of the stresses, either the stress or the mechanical properties of the wave. All this is going to give us an insight or a big picture on how the geomechanical properties are distributed along the lateral wall. So again, the areas with the higher anisotropy are going to be the ones we are going to pay attention to. I'm going to explain these three sections because this section here are the areas where we identify open fractures from the sonic look. In here I'm going to highlight three different areas. One for the open fracture, one for a partially conductive fracture, and one for the closed fracture. And the image on the right side is a resistivity image. So for the conductive fracture, we observe that the behavior of the sonic data, the caliper data, and the image has a particular shape. There's not so many disruptions in here on the sonic information compared to the conductive fracture. On the conductive fracture, that means we have a continuous or disruption on the otherwise homogeneous formation, and this is causing several noise, if you will, but it's not noise. It's just an indicator or on the fracture stages. This is a closed fracture. We see a continuous shape on the sonic properties on the Warhol wall, and we observe that particular pattern of the dipping and of the layers. On the partially open fracture, we see a small disruption in the sonic coherence and with some faults observed in here. And lastly, we see the conductive fracture that we have a lot of disruption on the sonic frequency analysis, on the sonic coherence, and we see more features on the fracture log. And this will be my last slide, because in here we are incorporating all this information that we have been discussing. Highlighting the areas that we have open fractures And when we correlate to the areas that we have the largest concentration on both the hydrocarbon mud logging and the TOC data, we observe that there is a particular set of conditions that suggest that most of the production that is achieved on these wells are coming from these areas that are highly fractured. Those areas are highly fractured, not only because of the current conditions, but also these potentially allow the concentration of hydrocarbons along these particular areas of the well. The other important content to highlight is the dolomite content. The dolomite concentration is given by this magenta line, and we observe that there is also a significant high concentration of that particular mineral in this area. So when put all the pieces of the puzzle together, we have this kind of indications. Unfortunately, we weren't able to obtain a PLT production logging tool that will confirm what is the contribution of each of these fracture stages. But for the next well, we are hoping to monitor closely these different attributes, so we can predict or summarize the different data sets that we have. So as conclusions, legacy petrophysics are challenging because we have information back from the 1960s, 80s, 80s. As the technology evolves, the resolution of the tools, even the operators, some of the operators have different data sets or different operating procedures that have the analysis of the whole basin challenging to try to incorporate the different variations. Source rock analysis is a very powerful methodology to provide insight on the hydrocarbon generation potential and migration. And lastly, the incorporation of the machine learning algorithms enhance the interpretation of these complex datasets. Machine learning, although is a very powerful, but also at the same time could be very misleading if it's not used properly. We need to be very careful on the statistical quality control in order to provide ultimate response for the overall basin interpretation. So thank you very much. This is some of the team members. I took the picture, that's why I'm not in there, but I'm in the other side of the camera. But thank you all for the contributions of this project. Thanks for the audience. I'm open for questions now. Thank you.
There's a question first from Albert. Albert, do you want to read that? Down the bottom.
Albert. Oh, dear friend Albert.
Yeah, Carlos.
Sorry?
That's in the comments. So he says, great insights in your presentation, Carlos. Regarding the problem of oil-based mud, might you have cores for which you can obtain certain center cuts that have no oil-based mud? Specifically associated with the cutting samples that had impregnated with the diesel.
We might be able to have it. We should have the core.
Not from the lateral section.
Not from the lateral section, no.
You could do an in-house study looking at that and do a one-to-one relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, for the analysis on the vertical section, we had like end frames, and those were not that affected, probably because of the same reason, because those end frames were far away from the edge of the core, and they were not as affected as the cuttings. But yeah, maybe we can build some correlation. The issue in there is that we didn't have, as I mentioned before, because of the coring got stuck, we didn't have a continuous log across the Cane Creek. So we had to extrapolate the logs from a nearby well and make a depth match for that. So that's also incorporated to the noise of the analysis. Thanks, Albert. When I get some, I'll get back to you, Albert. Thank you. Yes,
GOC has some kind of distribution from immature to post-mature stages.
yeah.
Do you think that applying some recovery techniques could enhance production, like thermal recovery or something?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is that if there are some techniques that we can enhance the production based on the manipulating the temperature. I don't think so because of the those temperatures are over 400 Celsius. So you will have to create some heat of source for 400 Celsius downhole. So I don't know. I think that's rather difficult. I mean, the typical, for instance, the steam enhanced oil recovery, that's different. That's different approach because you're changing the viscosity. It's like an emulsifier. You change the viscosity, not the chemical composition. So this Tmax is just an indication of the thermal maturity of the area. So that's the challenge. If you have a source of 400 Celsius downhole, maybe you can. But yeah, I think that's very difficult.
I think that Brian has his hand up.
Yes, Brian.
Hey, good morning, Carlos.
Morning.
Tremendously great presentation. Just wanted to ask about the machine learning approach and if you've had the opportunity yet to track how uncertainty, because you're quantifying uncertainty you can quantify uncertainty every step of the way. Is it possible? And have you had the opportunity to track how uncertainty is decreasing as you add data? You know, you and Nate and Ting and others have done such exercises without machine learning, but be curious to see if that's a possibility with the approach that you've laid out with these data, because you're adding legacy data with new data, and it's just and of course the legacy data bring their own uncertainty. So it's just a head scratcher for me.
Yes, it is. I haven't personally. That's kind of a challenge or the next future implementation of the model of the technology. But yeah, for sure, because uncertainty comes, as you mentioned, from the legacy, right? There's many variables that adds on the legacy. Some operators use limestone as a neutral porosity correction. Some other use dolomite. Some other use sandstone, and that's on wells that are next to each other. So all that uncertainty is adding up from the source. And then as we progress into the machine learning models, certainly there should be a way that we can incorporate these and use it as a feedback for the model itself. So yeah, that's future work we need to do.
Yeah, that's it's a great opportunity the way you're taking these emerging these data. Anyway, thanks again. Great talk.
Thanks, Ryan. If there are more questions. Yes.
Regarding the, so like the GOC analysis was kind of from the cuttings, right?
Yeah.
So is there any, do you have any idea like how extent is carbon richness like is within this interval?
That's that comes from the layer of the rich layer of the unit. Let me go back to my slides. That's an important question to clarify. Important factor to clarify. On the strat sequence, I mentioned that we have like a difference of phases, including the A, B, and C, as we see here. So these targets B and target C, if you see the core, those are, I don't know, like a 1 foot of layer maximum, right? So that particular layer that is organic rich has only 1 foot. So as you try to drill those, you are not recovering only that rich layer, but you also have samples or material for the surrounding areas, the Cane Creek B in this case, or the C top, or the C bottom. So you will have a different concentration based on like this image, right? You see, so the sample not necessarily have that organic rich. You also have the different like white dots because you are grabbing all the material from the formations around. So that's a good question to clarify that this should be average of the difference of phases rather than individual phases. It's very difficult to keep the drilling to follow exactly one particular layer, right? It's that's the way it is, and we see that on the gamma ray. The gamma ray on the lateral well goes all the way high and then suddenly goes all the way down. That's because the formations that you're drilling through are not continuous.
Carlos, do you have any publication articles that audience can?
It's in process. We have one that we are submitting soon, and we have the ARMA. In ARMA, we are going to present next June. We are going to present more details on the machine learning status. So that could be a good opportunity to discuss about the uncertainty. Yeah.
They can probably use the three printer method, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, all of them seems not very good, or do you have which method that you prefer, the three using which one's there?
In every data set, there is no like the only recipe is that you need to test them all. You need to test them all the different methodologies in here, for instance.
They also, I think maybe there's some little bit of wrong. It's all test, maybe it should be train. If you want to correct it up. I mean, the second, you see, it's a test, you may want to change it.
This test, train, yeah,
Yeah, if you want- and-
trainer test.
Oh, yes.
You're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be test, trainer test. Yeah.
So for all of the three things, all of them not very good. You see for the,
No, they're not.
Huh?
No, they are not.
Oh, yeah,
No.
even for the best that square, right,
Mhm.
0.9. It's not even to 0.4.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. So do you think what's the main reason it's not that?
So the main reason for this, I find two reasons. One is the fact that the logs that we are utilizing to extrapolate into the into the source log analysis, those logs are extracted from a different well because we the coding assembly got stuck and we weren't able to reach down using the same data set of logs. I mean, we did our best to depth match the properties for each of the different surfaces, but since we are not comparing exactly the same depths, that's going to be one factor. Like I have repeated this exactly same test for some other properties, like a sonic delta T, sonic shear, and these statistical measurements are way better. So that's one factor. The other one is the nature of the logs. I mean, that's the whole purpose of doing this exercise, because it will be complex for sure. There's a lot of variations, lithological variation.
You still prefer the three of them for different data you use?
Yeah, yeah. The important factor here is that we need to test, or we need to find which of the different tools or different variables that you have, which is going to give you the best. For instance, this the GPR. For the GPR, you have a covariance function, which is the overall Gaussian approximation, and then you have the kernel function. The kernel function can be either linear, exponential, or square exponential. You know, you have these different tools in order to have the best result. Yeah, the best match. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
We just want to say thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Just want to say thank you again to Carlos for this
Mm.
presentation today. One more round of applause. How about that real quick?
Thank you very much.
And then just as an update, next month on May 2nd, Joe Moore will be presenting on Utah Forge. Jenny will be sending out an email with that update. And then she'll also post this recording to the EGI's website, I believe. Is that correct? Okay. So thank you all for attending, and feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions for Carlos.
Thank you. Thank you all.